Hey, I'm Jace, and welcome back to my podcast, Drop Balls and Big Calls. This week, Michele Mattiuzzi. Michele has lived more lives than most of us will in our lifetime. He started out in one of the most high-pressure roles in the Australian Federal Police, working in counter-terrorism, protecting world leaders, including 2 Australian prime ministers. After walking away from the badge, Michele found himself as an actor in Home and Away, and proving that life experience can be more powerful than formal training. And if that wasn't enough, he then went and built a powerful corporate career, scaling a Harvey Norman business unit from 0 to 200 million in just 2 years, while leading growth and brand strategy for some of the world's most recognizable companies and personalities. This conversation is much more than just career changes. Michele opens up about resilience, burnout, mental health, authenticity, and the power of relationships. So settle in and enjoy this one. That's a good one. So, Michele, welcome to Drop Balls and Big Calls.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure, mate. I'm really looking forward to our chat today. So you have, for context for our listeners, you've guarded prime ministers, you've built a $200 million business unit, you've played a police officer on Home and Away, and much more that we'll unpack today. When you're at a barbecue or an event and someone asks you what you do and who you are, how the hell do you actually describe that without going off on a 20-minute journey?
That is so funny, and that is such a good and hilarious opening question, because even now, people talk about the elevator pitch. Every time I get asked that question, I myself sometimes don't know what to say, because I was like, how do you wrap it up? How do you summarize it quickly? How do you not sound boring? Or alternatively, how do you not sound like you're talking yourself up? Like, one of the go-tos I suppose I've done in recent years is I just say, I'm a consultant. And then people see bald head, big guy, and if I'm wearing a tracksuit, then people think it's dodgy. What do you mean by that? And then that opens up more questions. The answer is I don't know. You know, it was a lot easier back in the day when I don't have an answer. When I was in the Federal Police, it was easy. I'm a federal officer. I work for this, organization, or I work for the government. And then the others have been more straightforward. But I just say something like, I'm a consultant. Basically, all jokes aside, I build businesses, brands, and using all the varied experience that I've had, that's what I do with businesses and brands and, people and athletes. I help them scale, build. I think there's a lot of people in the industry, in the market now. Everyone's going to 10x your business. Everyone's going to help you do this and go viral and 10 million clicks and whatever. But realistically, that's what I do. I kind of position myself as a high-end fixer, brand, business builder, fixer, things like that.
Yeah, I love it. And you've got quite an extraordinary work ethic there. I noticed a particular comment on your LinkedIn page. You've built quite a following there, by the way. It's really cool if anyone wants to go check it out. But someone had written that you were always first on set and last off set when you're on Home and Away, and that's linked into a lot of other areas of your life as well, where you've been building businesses and content.
How back did you go there, Jace? When was that comment from?
I'm not actually sure, but there was a lot of great stuff there that I had to look through. But where did that work ethic come from?
That work ethic, I think, honestly, it came from poverty. It came from growing up and this is not by any means a sob story. Like, I know a lot of people globally have had it way worse and have it way worse at the moment. But relative to, anyone's upbringing or situation, we grew up, we were in and out of housing commission, women's refuges, and things like that. And as the oldest son, I suppose, in that scenario, and the oldest of 5 kids, you sort of take that burden. I think a lot of eldest children in single parent families can relate to this. It's almost, you feel a bit of a burden or responsibility for your family, like you want to help. And at a young age, I felt very powerless, because as a kid, 10 years and younger, there's not much you can do. You can't really go out and work and get a job. And I just felt useless. Like, I just felt really, really useless in a lot of ways growing up. I remember wanting to help my mum and wanting to help us improve our circumstances. And at that point, I couldn't. As soon as I could get a job, I was like, I think I lied about my age. I was 13 and I got a job in a pizza restaurant, and I was able to start making money. And while I was at school, I actually had 3 jobs at school. So I worked a couple of nights at a pizza restaurant, waiting. And then on Saturday, I worked at a Mercedes-Benz dealership, doing like sandwiches and like serving food to customers and waiting there as well. And then on Sunday after church, I worked at an Italian deli, slicing up the cold meats and things like that. So uh, the work ethic definitely came from there. I was fortunate when my mum remarried. She married my stepdad at the time, and he was a very successful businessman. He had some car dealerships, and having seen one side of life and then seeing another way, the way he lived, the way he presented, the way he spoke, he was just a gentleman in every sense of the word. He was really good to me and my brothers and sisters, and being able to see juxtaposition of seeing both sides. I just made a decision. I was like, well, I know what way I want to live. And I just wanted to, as soon as I could get out and work and change, and I could do something physically to change my surroundings and my circumstances, that's what I did. And I think it just came from that, like not wanting to have to put my own family through that or have children and suffer. Like it's just not a nice feeling. I think anyone who's been in those circumstances understand what I mean.
Yeah, big responsibility for a young fella. It links well into where I wanted to go to next, which it stems from coming across a video where you recently, I think about 5 or 6 months ago, you revisited John Paul College up in Brisbane there where you went to school. And you talked about it wasn't all smooth sailing. I think there was a comment saying straight D's and 1A. It wasn't always smooth for you there. Was that because of the amount of responsibility that you had having to work outside of school? What do you recall of those years?
Yeah, it's funny that like I was really fortunate to go to John Paul College. They had a program, I think they still have it, called the Horizons program, which let me do year 12 over 2 years as part of a scholarship for swimming. Definitely, like as I said, I had 3 jobs during school. I was working long hours. Swimming training is, I think it's one of the most grueling in terms of training, like because it's such an unnatural motion, like for your body. They say every week or month you have off training, it takes double that to get back into it. Like, if you have a few weeks off running, you can kind of get back into it. But if you haven't been in the pool for a while, it's difficult. And then there's a morning and then the afternoon training. It's exhausting. So that plus working, plus my mum in my last year of year 12 or first year of year 12 was pregnant with my sister, my younger sister. So my mum's having a baby as well. And that was another thing too. I was like, what do you mean? Like that was kind of a bit of a shock. It sort of came unexpected. And my sister, she's great. And she's got her own child now, which you probably saw in that video. But yeah, I remember falling asleep in class. Teachers would send like messages or to my parents. Part of it, yeah, was that. I mean, it wasn't all that. I think part of it was not that I was lazy, but I only did things that I was really interested in. If I like something and I'm interested in something, I'll double down on it. But things that I have no interest in, I'm just like, well, I know I'm not going to use any of this after school. But I think it was a combination. It was definitely being tired. We lived in the city and our school was about an hour and 20 minutes away. So there was a lot of commuting, morning and afternoon swimming sessions, working, church. At the time we were going to church on Wednesday night and a Sunday morning. Yeah, I was just always tired. Post Malone, mate, always tired.
Yeah, that's a lot for a kid. No, certainly don't blame you falling asleep in class. What were you dreaming of at that time? Because obviously, as you come towards the end of your schooling years, you started to look at the AFP. But did you have goals and ambitions throughout your schooling years there?
Yeah, well, it was funny when I was cleaning out. I just moved into this new place recently here, and I was looking through the career guidance counselor thing that you have with the year 12 career person. And one of the things that stood out is I just kept saying I wanted to work for myself. I wanted to work for myself. I didn't even know what that meant. And I don't think back then entrepreneurship wasn't as big as it was now. Like it was more, you did your normal jobs, even 20-something years ago, right? So I suppose since, e-commerce and social media and the last, say, 10, 15 years, entrepreneurship is very common. Everyone's an entrepreneur or a serial entrepreneur. They call themselves a CEO. Even if they're selling just 3 lip balms in their living room, they're a CEO these days. So back then, I didn't know really what that meant, but not that I had a problem with authority, but I maybe a little bit had a problem with authority. I just wanted to be able to be in control of my destiny because I think as a young dude who was motivated, as I said, going back to that feeling of helplessness where you're just in whatever situation, there's not much you can do about it. I think it sounds silly, but I just wanted to I just wanted stability. I wanted structure. I wanted to feel organized and to not feel like I'm always in survival mode or like we're reacting or like we're just barely getting by. I think, and a lot of, leaders and people, Andrew Tate and people like that talk about, it's not a man's job to feel happy or comfortable. But I think as a young dude then, I just wanted to not feel, um, as as things were for the last few years, I just wanted there to be some things to look forward to or some good moments or, um, where I didn't feel like I was always having to solve problems or put out fires or, does that make sense? So it wasn't like I had a goal. I didn't want to be like a doctor or anything. I kind of just wanted to work for myself. I wanted to buy a car. I wanted freedom. I wanted to train. I wanted to travel. I wanted to just, improve my life and the life for my family. That was kind of my only goal at that time. Obviously, I had aspirations later. Other goals and other things came when I started exploring the world. But at that time, I think it was just when you're in survival mode, you're not sitting there. Well, I wasn't anyway. When you're in that survival mode, I wasn't sitting there dreaming of anything in particular. I was just like, this is shit. How do I change it?
So link us up. Out of school, you start getting pulled towards the Australian Federal Police. What pulled you in that direction at such a young age?
Yeah, good question. It was one incident, actually. So I was working for Virgin Blue. The airline had just sort of started a couple of years before that, and I was traveling as a flight attendant, which was cool. I was 19 years old. It was freedom. I was getting out, traveling around the country, making good money at that point. I was able to buy a new car and a motorbike and, get girls and all sorts of things like that. I think
Living
Virgin
the
at the time
dream.
were quite. Yeah, well, that was living the dream in a way. Yeah, it was just good to travel. And the thing that changed my mind was, again, I wanted to better myself. I wanted to make good money. And I knew that Virgin was a good job and, still a great company. I'm sure but for me, I always wanted to push myself and just challenge myself. So after about 2 years, I was 21 and that feeling of helplessness came up again. I was on a red-eye flight from Perth back to Brisbane and there were these drunk guys. I don't know. I don't know whether they were FIFO workers or whether they were dodgy sort of dudes, but they were big dudes, drunk as anything. They just kept ordering more alcohol and then they started like harassing some of the girls and just being disrespectful. And then I was the only guy in the crew. So they're like, oh, what are you going to do about it, mate? Like they were just like, oh, get us. And they're just being really disrespectful, And there was a lot of them and the crew was kind of scared. And I'll be honest, I was scared. I tried not to pretend that I wasn't scared. But they're like, you wait till we get in the ground and all this. And it's like 4 hours till 3 hours to go on the flight. And I was like, yeah. So I spoke to the captain and he just cut service of alcohol off. He just made a PA and he's like, look, I will deal with it on the ground. And at the time that it was called the Australian Protective Service and they were just about to merge with the Australian Federal Police. So they basically looked like police in uniform, same sort of thing. It was just it was called the Australian Protective Service, had guns and everything, and they were the armed security at the airport. And these two massive, massive units came on the flight. So I was thinking, what's going to happen is going to be a scuffle. Like these two dudes, 6'4", not like muscly and not fat, but, just the solid, burly dudes who look like they'd been, working on a farm, beard, just no fear, walked down and there was 4 of them. There was like 3 there and then 1 behind. And they're like, right, we're not going to put you in cuffs. You're going to do this. You're going to do this, this, this. You're going to get up. And if you don't do what I say, I'm going to pull your ears off. You understand? And the guys just shut themselves. They got up and just marched them off. And that was the end of it. And I was standing there and I was like, do I want to be this guy or do I want to be that guy? You know what I mean? And I think that was that moment. Again, I just felt like, because I felt useless and powerless. And I was like that, that thing of being able to sort of be in control as a man, to be able to protect yourself, to be able to not feel fear and to have the capability and the skill set. Because at the time I was doing martial arts, but I didn't have the skill set. I'd never really been in a violent confrontation or anything in that sense, like other things in the past, but not in that sort of sense. So, I just locked in on that. And then, I applied and literally within a couple of months, I got accepted and made my way to Canberra.
Amazing. I guess there was a lot of training between then and going into protecting the Prime Minister. Talk
Yeah.
us through what you learned about people in that time, and I guess that journey right through to that moment where you're on the world stage.
Yeah. So I had a couple of months. I knew that I was going to apply. So I didn't want to go there and feel useless. So I'd started training probably maybe 12 months before that. I'd started training martial arts in Kyokushin karate. And I was really dedicated. I was sort of moving through the ranks and like the belts and stuff, and, building confidence as a young man. And so I kept doing that. And then I really started doubling down on the gym because I was quite like, this typical swimmer's physique, tall, sort of lean, a bit lanky, which is not what I am now. Like probably very different physique build then compared to now. Yeah, I just started pushing myself on overnights. I just was cooking my food and I just requested overnight where they had a good gym. I just wanted to, train and just, I liked the way it made me feel. And then we got into recruit school and it was great. Again, I was away from home. It was challenging and it was exciting. I think a lot of dudes, probably a lot of young guys would, like the idea of going into the military or policing or, fire brigade and having those extra skills and training. It's kind of like sitting through recruit school, eating meals together and handling firearms and doing all this cool stuff. It was definitely a lot of fun. There was a fair bit of theory involved as well. I went in as a protective service officer at the time because I had a friend who was in the unit and in this counter-terrorism first response unit, and he was telling me about it. He was sort of one of my family friends, and he'd come back from Canberra and visit his family, and I kept hearing these stories about this unit. And so the training was cool, like, just the running and the fitness and, the food was there. Like you get to go to the mess and eat all this food. Like you didn't have to organize and prepare. It was structure, which I'd severely lacked for a lot of my life, which I really, really liked. I liked the idea of, it was a tiny room bed. It had the old gas sort of oil heaters on the side, the old college. But I loved it. I loved that. You got your uniforms, you got your clothes. You could go to the supplement shop and buy protein. You had Saturday, and mostly Sundays off. I was like, this is great. Like, it was so good. And so the training was, I think, about 3 or 4 months. And it was just good. And in Canberra too, such a different climate and a different place. So that was exciting too, the travel, finding my own place to live, 21 years old, being out of home and having that kind of responsibility on station, because I had to go to station first before I applied for the specialist unit. And it was all exciting. I was dating a girl at the time who was a flight attendant, so she'd come and visit, on weekends and, and things like that. So it was just a good period, good memories.
It was a bit of a cold jump from Brisbane to Canberra.
Getting the credit card out and scraping ice off the window in the mornings and stuff. And our recruit school was right in the middle of winter. So running in the morning with Skins were my best friend. Like Skins had just kind of been invented then, that brand. So I was like, that was like my best friend, Skin, beanies and gloves. But again, it kind of felt like something out of the movies. Like it was just, I really enjoyed it.
How good. What did the first steps out of recruit school look like? Did you get to decide which avenues you would go down?
No, not really. We were a federal officer, which was in protection. So you could have went into ACT policing or federal agent or protective service. I didn't, at the time, I didn't really have an interest in doing the general duties stuff. You'd hear stories about, locking up drunks and this sort of stuff. And the guy that I knew who was in this specialist unit, I was like, well, that's what I'm aiming for. That was my goal. And to do that counter-terrorism first response stuff. There were some better stations and there were some not so good stations. A lot of people were going to get put around different states and things like that. The station that I got was called official establishment. So it was a Prime Minister's Lodge and the Governor General's residence. And the nickname for that station at the time was called the Retirement Village because a lot of the officers there were of a certain vintage. Lovely guys, really cool guys. My sergeants and that, they were all cool. My inspector was awesome. But, you're doing all this cool stuff like counter-terrorism first response stuff in training. And, it would have been cool to go to like the airport, like where you got drunks on the flight or you got maybe some sort of things happening, some excitement, or they had DPU, they had a diplomatic protection unit. So you're protecting like embassies and, that sort of stuff. Or there was Parliament House, drunks or crackheads or protesters or ferals rolling around Parliament House. To get OEs, I think I was the only one there's only two of us from our whole group that got OEs. And I was like, damn, this is like the worst station. But it turned out to be a good thing later to get into that, the operational deployment team, because my inspector at station, his name was Neil Croker, really good guy. He was a top bloke. He was the guy that recruited me at the assessment centre in Brisbane. He was at the recruitment day for the intake when, people come for their first assessment, and I got selected. And I don't know whether he had anything to do with me going to his station, but we got on really well. And I was only on station for like 3 months because an expression of interest came out for that tactical special operations unit. And I was like, cool. So I just put my application in for, to go to the assessment centre, which was over 3 or 4 days. Yeah, so I wasn't on station that long, but it was pretty boring, man. Like the first 3 months, because at the time it was in that changeover period. It was coming up to the election, so it was still Prime Minister John Howard, but he was great. He was active. He was always out. So rarely he was home. So most of the time you're guarding an empty home. There was nobody there.
Mm.
What do? You walk around an empty house in the middle of winter. It's like, that's it. I was like, this is going to be the next, how many years of my career? I was like, damn. So,
Wowza. So, yeah, the expression of interest comes out, and then you're going into counter-terrorism and riot control, from what I understand. High pressure roles, they're not sort of areas that you can clock off from, and I can imagine it wasn't a lot of sitting around from that moment on.
Mate, that was awesome. Like, at first I didn't get accepted. From what I understood, I got first on the order of merit, like in all the different sections. I did really well because I prepared for it. I knew that it was sort of coming up. So I made sure that I was, in the gym running. I knew the manual backwards. I knew all the powers of arrest. I knew all the theory. And that was funny because at school I didn't care about stuff. And like I said, all D's and 1A, but this, I made sure that I was all over it. Like, I was interested in it. So I didn't even feel like study. So I got to the assessment center and I did really well in shooting everything. And then when I think it was a couple of weeks wait until they announced who was selected, I think there was only 1 or 2 spots available. And my name wasn't on the list. I didn't get in. And I was like, how? Like, in the run, I know I smoked everybody. In the running, I'd smoked everybody, like shooting, everything. Like the assessment panel, like it was flawless. It was like, I think I got 98% or 99% on the exam. And then when I spoke to the inspector of the specialist unit, it came down to experience. He's like, dude, you were a flight attendant 12 months ago. You've been on station for 3 months. You haven't even seen your probation out. And I was like, but surely if you outperform other people, you should still get an opportunity. That was my rationale, my way of thinking. He's like, no, that's not how it is. And I said, all right, fair enough. So I was like, well, I'm not going to stay in Canberra and freezing my ass off. And he said, apply again in 12 months. And I'm like, do I want to wait here for 12 months to maybe get in or maybe get told no again? Because like, at what point is 1 year, 3 years, how much will be enough experience? If I've already done my best and beat everybody, like, what am I going to, So I went to Neil, my inspector, and I just said, look, if I'm going to sit around on station, I'd rather go home to Queensland. I'll join Queensland Police. And at least I'm there with my family and I'll do general duties. And they had a more specialized tactical unit called CERT. And a friend of mine, a friend of a friend, he was in CERT and I saw one of their training videos. I was like, dude, that's so cool. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just leave the AFP. I'll join Queensland Police. At least I'll be in warmer weather. I'll be with my family. And if I'm going to do 3 years, at least general duties will be fun. And then I'll get in. He then called the tactical operations guy and just said, look, he's been great on station. He's here all the time. He takes all the overtime. He's always early. He prepares his home food. Do you want to give him an opportunity or do we let him go? And I got a call as I was boarding a flight to go over on holidays. I'd put in my resignation. I had like a week or 2 weeks of leave that had sort of accumulated from college and whatever. And then when I came back, I was literally just going to move. And the inspector called me of the specialist unit and just basically said, look, I'm going to give you an opportunity, but if you let me down or you do anything wrong, if you're late once, somebody doesn't like you, he goes, you're out. And that's it. And I'm like, I'm happy with those terms. And he goes, all right. He goes, I'll see you when you get back. And that was it. And I literally, so a few people said something recently when I've been posting on LinkedIn on someone's looked up and they're like, there's no fucking way you did that in 2 years. My family's been in the police. You say that you're an instructor and you're in this, and that's impossible to do that in that time. And legit, that's exactly what happened. I don't think that run would probably happen now in today's day and age. And it was just perfect timing. It was me, right place, right time, doing the right thing, having a good inspector that called on my behalf, and without him making that call, definitely wouldn't have happened. He could have just gone, yeah, cool, all the best. And then without the other inspector wanting to, take an opportunity on me as well. So literally within 3 months of finishing recruit school, I came back and, I was in this unit called the ODT, which was awesome. Operational Deployment Team, traveling with the Prime Minister and, doing counter-terrorism first response. It was unreal. Like I was, I think 21 or 22.
Incredible. And what did that role teach you about handling pressure?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Handling pressure. The thing that I learned is it's not about the big, juicy steroid freak, the guys that you see in the movies, the Ronnie Coleman looking dudes. They're not the dudes who are always, guys like Ben Roberts-Smith are an exception. The guy's 6'10", he's a monster, right? He's huge. But typically a lot of the really hard tactical operators, we did a lot of cross-training with, the Air Marshal program, with the tactical unit, the Riot Squad in New South Wales Police. And the guys there they're not what you think. Like the people in there, like there are some big units, but it's, the thing that I realized is what will determine whether you're successful in those roles. And even dudes like the SAS, like who are obviously they're a next level above. Like what I did was cool, but then at that level, that's a different world, right? But it's the guys and girls or whoever in the team that your ability to handle and tolerate a high level of stress and still perform at a high level will determine whether you're going to be successful in those one of those units. Because usually the big roid dudes, like they get gassed. There's no endurance, there's no heart. A lot of it is physical, relying on that external validation. And when you're in a situation that chips it down, a lot of it's the heart, it's the determination and that mongrel dog inside you, and being able to handle that stress. And if you're on the range, and you've got a gas mask on, you're out of breath, you've been running, you need to pull your weapon out and you still need to be able to fire center of scene mass and have a good grouping. You can't go, oh, well, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, and start spraying bullets everywhere. Or you get hit with OC, OC spray, and then you just drop to the ground, and then someone takes your weapon. You need to be able to still function at a high level under that stress and duress and still make good decisions. And that was the thing that it really taught me, was that, is working with a lot of guys who are some really, really good operators. One of the guys I'm still really, really good mates with now, and he had a professional athlete background. He was played basketball for Australia in the NBA. I think like most defensive blocks in NBL history, the guy's like 6'8", 6'9", and he was like one of our, I suppose, section leaders. He's one of the senior guys in the team. But being around dudes like that, as a young bloke, I like some of the best role models you can have. And I still in touch with him today and still ask his advice on certain things now. And I think, I probably lacked a lot of that. Well, I lacked that growing up in my own life, that leadership. I didn't have a relationship with my dad. My stepdad was great. Like he taught me a lot of the business stuff that I knew, that I know now and that I use. But that other side, that sort of, from my inspector and from the guys in the team, it was so eye-opening to see how, again, methodically they operate and, how you can just deal with stress. And one of the things I keep thinking of, it's being able to, when in a training scenario, whether you're in a firefight or you're pinned down or whatever, you've got to take the initiative away from the enemy and you've got to keep moving forward. You can't just go, I'm here. You've got to, it doesn't matter what's happening. You've got to keep moving forward, making decisions and not get sort of pinned down, And I think that principle was one of the biggest takeaways that I learned when I transitioned into business and corporate and, some of the challenges that I had over the last few years. So
Did that environment enable you to develop a decision-making framework? Because, it's pretty chaotic in the world these days, right? And just judging by what you've done in business and throughout your career, you've always been able to do exactly what you said, move forward, make key decisions and do it effectively and quickly.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It hasn't always, as you know, it hasn't always been sunshine and rainbows. Like I had a really difficult period there with a breakdown, basically from burnout and exhaustion. I realized very quickly that I'm not, this universal, soldier sort of RoboCop dude. I burnt out and I had a really difficult period for a while there. But up until that point and then since, and even during that period, definitely I remembered that because I was in some really, really dark places. I'd lost everything that I'd worked for, the business, my contract on home and away. I'd sort of just stepped away from everything. I just needed to take some sort of time away for a period. And I still worked and did some consulting and other things, but I knew like I was in a bad situation, but I had to sort of keep moving forward. So that was one thing. I just kept thinking, well, it's going to get better. I can't stay put. I have to keep moving. Yeah, the business or whatever that I was doing, or the income that I was making, or things that I was doing, some of those things were falling away. Relationships fall away. You lose some family or friends. Like, I just had to. Like, there's no. When people say that no one's coming to save you, I learned that the hard way. Like, you think that people say things like, "Oh, it ain't weak to speak," or you reach out for support, and at the end of the day, like, really nobody gives a shit. Like, if you're being really honest, like no one really care about you or your situation more than yourself.
When did you start to notice those signs that you were burning out? Was that sort of towards the end of the AFP years, or was that sort of
No,
further down the track?
no, that was like, this was years later. Like the AFP, that was like, they were great years. I only left because the federal government funding changed. And, my inspector, he knew that was happening and he was really good to me. He just said, look, I want you to have all the opportunities that you can after this specialist unit closes down. He goes, we probably won't be here in 12 months because typically the Labor government didn't fund defence and policing and specialist things as much. So I think it was something to do, it was above my pay grade at that stage. But from what I understood, it was to do with federal government funding. So all the specialist units would sort of get scaled down. So he just said, look, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to put you on the instructor's course. So again, 3 months out of college, I think I was in the specialist unit for maybe 2 or 3 months. So 6 months into the AFP, I'm then on the instructor's course to be a weapons instructor, defensive tactics instructor, riot squad instructor, which was crazy at that age to have that skill set with weapons and long arms and rifles. And we did bomb awareness, bomb like courses and things like that. It was awesome. So all those skills sort of really helped. And then when the team got cut, I was like, I was in that same position. I said, well, I was back at OEs. I was back at the retirement village. And then the old guys were great. Like, I loved them. They were so much fun. Like, they were like mates, but they were like, oh, like they'd hide in the bushes and stuff and be like, oh, the tactical guys here. Oh, look out. They'd just make funny. Oh, mate, they'd hide behind the chair or just take the piss sort of thing, which was funny. And then one of the guys, he was a Kiwi guy. I can't remember his name, but he was like, that uncle sort of figure. And he didn't say much, but he said one time he came out with something that was almost prophetic. He said to me, I'll never forget this. He goes, I was talking about what I'd done and how much fun it was and whether I'm back at the retirement village again. And I was like, what am I doing now? And he goes, I'm not even going to try and do the Kiwi accent, but he's like, oh, brother, it's better to be at the bottom of a ladder that you want to climb rather than halfway up of one that you don't, And I was like, it's so true. I was like, do I want to rise through the ranks and continue in policing and that sort of field, or would I rather reset and do something, that I was now interested in? So I thought, well, I've got this great skill set. I'm an instructor. I've got all these, qualifications. I was only in the AFP for like 2 years. So I said, I can always go back. I'm early 20s. I can always go back and join a police force or some sort of thing later if I want to, but now I should try something else. And that's when I moved to Sydney and started acting. So that whole acting period, I got on Home and Away, like 12 months after leaving the AFP, I ended up on Home and Away playing Constable Neil Stevenson. So I went from doing policing stuff in, real life, policing, it's technicality, it's protective services, counter-terrorism, first response. And then, I'm doing that on television. So, people that I used to see on telly, now I'm I'm on set and I'm like seeing Alf and Irene and all that. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like, it was just such a far uh, thing from what I was doing only 12 months before. And again, another massive change, but it was good. It was fun. It was exciting.
How on earth do you go from that environment to acting on Home and Away? Like, people go to acting school for years to knock on the door of that stuff. And was it just like they reached out looking for someone with a background in policing or AFP? How did it come about?
Yeah, good question. Look, I think a lot of things, good opportunities that I've had is a combination of right place, right time, doing the work. Like, if you're there and you're putting yourself in those positions and opportunities and you're out and about stretching yourself, opportunities will come. Like, if you're in your living room and you're at home and you're scrolling or you're playing video games or having a slap at the pokies, like, it's very rare that I suppose opportunities will come and find you. You got to go out there for them. So I actually, and I think part of it too is you remember when Conor McGregor rose and he was like real big and he was sort of started taking off the UFC guy? And they started calling him Mystic Mac. Remember how he'd predict fights? He's like, I see these shots, I see these sequences. And he goes, I tell you now in the second round, he goes, I'm going to do this and all that sort of stuff. This was, I think was it before that period? I think it would have been before Conor McGregor thing. And I just, unbeknownst to myself, I sort of did that in a way where my mates are like, why are you going to leave the AFP? What are you going to do? You got a good gig here, you get good super and all this. And I was like, I don't give a shit about that. And I said, I've got a pretty good skill set. I'm pretty young still. I was like, I'll probably, because I didn't know whether Home and Away was filmed in Sydney or Melbourne. I was like, I'll probably go to Sydney, and I'll get a gig on Home and Away or Neighbours playing a cop. I was like, because who else can do like this better than me? Some actor who's been reading like in Shakespeare and all this, he's not going to be able to be me. That was my mindset. And I said that to him. And literally 12 months later, almost to the day, that had happened. So I went to Sydney. I met up with a guy who's an acting coach. And I had no money because I sort of left abruptly. I was like, fuck, I've got no money. I was just pulling beers in a pub. And I said to him, he said to me, he goes, look, why don't we do a trade? I want to quit smoking and I want to get in shape. You were an instructor in the AFP. Why don't you do like sessions for me, do my meal plan, do my diet, and I'll do acting classes for you. His name's Paul Barry. Awesome guy, lives in LA, like awesome dude and so generous. And he actually worked with a lot of the really, really top actors. He was a great actor and still is a great actor in his own right, but he was a really, really good teacher. He was just able to break it down and just get to the end goal quick. Like, he didn't make me do Shakespeare and Hamlet and all this shit that I was not interested in, right? So yeah, we'd do 2-3 sessions a week. We'd start with a PT session, then I'd go back, get changed, do an acting class. We did a lot of camera classes. So he taught me all the fundamentals, and same thing. I just studied, watched YouTube, I watched movies, went to theater. I just saw and tried to immerse myself in the whole thing of what had happened. And I applied for NIDA. I got rejected in that 12 months straight away. And then applied for some other schools. I didn't get in. And then literally out of the blue, like, then this never happens. I got a call from my agent going, oh, there's an episode for you tomorrow on Home and Away. I said, what do you mean? Like, well, where's the audition? I'm like, oh no, there's no audition. And I don't know the backstory, but she thought that someone had either dropped out for this role because it was only a small part, or they hadn't cast it or something hadn't happened. But I got a call at like this time at like almost dark, 4 or 5 o'clock on a weekday. And the call time the next day was like midday, or it was around 24 hours. It was like later the next afternoon. I was like, no audition. They're like, no, you're playing this constable. It was called Constable Nader from Newcastle Police. I was playing. I was like, cool. Like, they must have seen on my profile that I was acting before. They're like, well, he'll be able to do it. Get him on. So I was like, oh, here's my opportunity, So I was like psyching myself up. I went to the gym, like, to get all the, the pump before. And I just made sure that everyone on set sort of knew what I'd done and just was friendly to everybody, tried to get on well with everyone. I remember the director, his name was Jeffrey Nottage, like, awesome. He was a lovely, lovely bloke. And I was just talking to someone, and when you're in the studio, there are mics everywhere. Like, so you got to be really careful when you're on set, on the soundstage. You don't say anything about anybody or whatever, because anyone can hear, like, the people with mic, like the headphones can all hear it. And I was talking to somebody, and And he came up, he took his headphone out. He goes, "Oh, I guess you're in the federal police, were you?" I said, "Oh, yeah." And then he started telling me this story for like 15 minutes of like a mate of his that was in the police or something. And everyone's standing around waiting for him because like time's precious in that thing. He's just telling me this story about policing and about this and and he goes, "Oh, that's cool." He goes, "Oh, how would you say these lines? It sounds a bit more like, a bit more you and a bit more authentic." And I'm like, "Oh, I'd probably say this, this, this." He goes, "All right, say that." And it was just really cool. So I came in, I'd arrested this chick, brought her in. I met Esther Anderson, who was playing Charlie at the time. She was the main cop. Got on really well with her. And then my agent literally called me the next day and said, "Oh, everyone on set really liked you. The director liked you. They want to offer you a recurring regular role, but they're going to change your name. You're going to be called Constable Neil Stevenson now." I'm like, "That's it?" And they're like, "Yeah, that's it." And I played that role for almost 10 years, which was awesome. So, the question about just going to NIDA and studying, I kind of knew that playing myself, because guys that, I don't know if you are the same as me, but I love guys like Arnie and Stallone and Van Damme and Jason Statham and all these action heroes. And you look at those guys like, look, Stallone's a great writer and a producer, but I wouldn't say he's the best actor. Arnie, he's not a good actor. You know what I mean? These guys weren't great actors, but they were the biggest blockbuster stars of our generation. They defined that they were movie stars, and I just remember I was like, I wanted to just do that. Like, it's like, I don't really want to, I'm never going to do My Left Foot with Daniel Day-Lewis. I'm never going to be Rain Man or like those kind of character actors or Charlie I'm not going to be Willy Wonka. Like, I was just going to play that part. And everyone's like, "Oh, you've got to be diverse. You've got to have range." I'm like, fuck range. I'll just do what I do. I'll just do my thing. And I think that's kind of what gave me the career, like, the extra work that I got, because it was probably easy for casting directors. They're like, "Oh, cop, security guard. Oh yeah, he'll do it." It's going to be me versus some guy from NIDA who, lived in his parents' house, never worked, never had any difficulties, never had struggles. It's like, dude, you're not going to play this role better than me. I don't care how many Hamlet, or how many Tennessee Williams plays you've done. Like, it's just not, you're just not going to be able to do it. Like, and then I think the study that I did with Paul Barry and the classes and everything else, I tried to fine tune my skills. And funnily enough, I still thought that maybe I didn't have the skill set to get to that next level. So I applied for NIDA again. I'd been on Home and Away for about 12 months at this time, and I'd done, a handful of episodes, not full time, but it was recurring. And I was much better this time technically as an actor. I started watching a lot of like The Office with Ricky Gervais and just really trying to fine tune my craft, so to speak. And I got through to the final like part of the things, and they, you had to do your monologue. And then I don't know why the guy asked me this. He must have been a fan of The Office too. And the monologue that I did was quite serious. And he goes, "Do the monologue again, but do it as if you're David Brent from The Office." And I'm like, "Oh, this is right up my alley." So it's this real serious thing about someone dying. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, someone's dead. Oh yeah, yeah. Against karate, like that kind of." And it was hilarious. And he goes, "Mate, that is brilliant." And he pulled me aside at the end and he goes, "Look, like they have the intermission and they let you know if you get callbacks or if you're going to get in." And he pulled me aside and he goes, "Dude," he goes, "Mate, that was great. That was so fun. It was really good range." He goes, "Look, I see you're on Home and Away. I see your credits on IMDb." He goes, "Do you really want to come here?" And I said, "Well, I feel like I kind of have to, like, all these great actors that I looked up to, Heath Ledger and Hugh Jackman and Hugo Weaving, Meryl Streep, all these great actors have had this, amazing training." And I felt like, maybe I have to. And he said, "Look, some people need to come here." He goes, "If they've had no life experience." He goes, "Look at the stuff you've done in your career before." He goes, "The aim of coming to acting school is to get paid work." He goes, "A lot of actors will leave here and never get any paid work." He goes, "You're already getting paid work on one of the number one shows." He goes, "Mate, don't stop the momentum." He goes, "Just keep doing what you're doing." And for me, it was funny because I felt like I needed that. It's like he'd given me permission to go, "You're doing good, keep going," which I think throughout my life, a lot of times I didn't really have that. Like I was my own judge. I judged myself against other people on my own yardstick of whether I was doing good or not. So for someone who was, an established drama teacher and was, obviously pretty senior at NIDA to tell me that, I was like, cool, fuck NIDA. And like, I don't need that shit. And I my career just kept going on and on. And like, he was right. Some people need it to break out of their shell or develop the skills. But, there's a lot of great actors who haven't had formal training. So yeah,
That's incredible. And yeah, it must have just given you this absolute renewed sense of belief in yourself and what you were doing.
You know what's funny? Just a quick story. I don't want to digress too much, but my mum was actually down the week before my second interview for NIDA. And my brother at the time, my younger brother, had started doing some really good short films up in Brisbane with one of his mates who I think was studying filmmaking. And my brother, I haven't seen him for a long time. We sort of, shame we had a bit of a falling out, but he's really cool. Even though he was my younger brother, in a lot of ways I looked up to him. Like, he was just he's just a really funny sort of cool dude. Some people who are just effortlessly cool, just the charisma, the way he would interact. I did a sport and then I wanted to be good at soccer, and then he went further, he did it and then he went better. You know what I mean? He was just naturally good with girls, and he started doing these short films, and my mum sent me the link and I was like, he's good. He was really just charismatic, and he was probably maybe mid-teens. He was maybe 16. And I was like, oh, wow. And then my mum said to me, she goes, oh, well, don't worry. She goes, if you don't get into NIDA or your acting career doesn't work out, he goes, maybe you can be your brother's agent,
No.
And I was like, I'm on Home and Away already. I've done stuff. I've done all this stuff. He's done 2 short films with his mate studying thing. And she's like, oh, maybe you can be his agent. I was like, he hasn't even done any. He's got no paid work. But I said, who says that? You know what I mean? And it was just
it should be your agent.
But I just was like, I'll show you. But, it's obviously she's just always trying to be supportive of all her kids. But it was just, I remember that. I was like, what an odd thing to say to somebody.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, 10 years, amazing, career on the screen. How did Harvey Norman commercial start to come about and transition into the business world? What led to you pivoting off that path?
Again, man, being broke, being poverty. It's funny how much of a motivator poverty is, I was studying acting and, acting by acting standards, I suppose, being so early in my career, I suppose I was successful. There'd been a lot of people at it a lot longer who didn't have those sort of credits or who weren't getting work as often as I was. But people are like, oh, you're on this and you're on that. You've got a lot of commercials. But I think my best year acting, I think I made maybe 30 grand in my best year. And it was deceiving because I was on semi-regularly on Home and Away. It might have been a couple of episodes a month, sometimes 2-3 episodes a week where I'd have, cameo. So the perception was, it was almost 10 years. It was 8.5 years. It was almost like people were like, oh, he's been on Home and Away forever and a day, not full time. But the perception is that you're always working. It helped get other roles because people would always see you on telly. But even then, you can't live on 30 grand a year. It was, so it was a bittersweet because people would think, oh, you're doing well, or they'd family be like, oh, that's great. I saw you on telly. I saw you here. And it's like, I'm barely getting by. It was only fortunate that I was living with one of my mates from the AFP. He'd moved to Sydney. He was a federal agent. I was living with one of my mates and one of my really good mates from high school. Still good mates with both of those guys now. And he was like a director or a partner at PwC. I was living with a federal agent and a partner at PwC. And we rented this pretty cool apartment in the middle of Randwick. It's a 3-bedroom apartment. And they just looked and they're like, do you want to come live with us? And well, we went and looked at this place together. And I think they divided 85% of the rent amongst themselves and just got me to pay whatever I could. It was like $120 a week or $100 a week. It was nothing. So they were really cool. They were really supportive, and they just saw that I was working hard and I was studying and I was training and we'd go to the gym together. And my mum was supportive too at that time. She had all this stuff in storage. So she sent stuff down to help us furnish the place. And it was just, I didn't want to be poor. And I was with my girlfriend at the time we'd been together for, a number of years. And I knew that she wanted to get married, and we were talking about marriage and things like that. And again, I felt useless, as a child, that childhood thing that I felt useless. And she was cool. She was just supportive as well. Yeah, I just was something has to change. That was my big motivator, was again, not to be poor, not to feel useless. I was working with a friend in a health food shop at the time, and she actually put me in touch with this, with one of the franchisees of one of the biggest sort of Harvey Norman stores. And same thing as always, just work ethic. I went there, I worked hard, was making good sales, became one of the top salespeople there pretty quickly. I didn't know anything about the products, but it was when those 100-inch TVs started coming out. Those $20,000 TVs, they were LGs. It was like OLED and all. It was when the boom of those big smart TVs started coming out, and they were in the window everywhere. $18,000 TVs, and like these really high end sound systems. And in Bondi, it was Bondi Junction where we were. There's obviously a lot of people there with a lot of money. A certain types of clientele who just had serious cash. And I think that salesmanship and background in selling and working hard, I think because I didn't know as much about the industry, it helped, because I was like, okay, well, I'll just sell the top TVs and, the monster cables and the extended warranties, and I'll just sell all the big ticket items. And I think it was like there within the first month or 2 months, I was doing sales for like some 30 grand, 40 grand sales. And I'd sell an OLED TV with full sound system, full installation, everything they told me to sell. I just went and sold it, thinking, oh, well, that's what I got to do. And people are like, how'd you just do that? And I didn't know much about tech stuff, but we had like the A team, that unit of that team that we had in that era, they were all just guns. Everyone sort of worked off each other. And and then one of the managers got me running the sales training, and they're like, what's he doing running sales? And he's like, he's only just got here. And he goes, how many sales have you done for 30 grand pianos? Like they'd call it like grand pianos, like 30 grand pianos. He goes, how many 30 grand piano sales have you done in the last? He goes, never. He goes, well, maybe you should listen to him. Maybe he might know something you don't, So it was kind of cool. I started, doing some sales training there, and I took on the extended warranty, and things just started going well. And the franchisee at the time, he was a really, really good bloke, would see things ahead of time. So we just became really good mates. I had a motorbike, he had a motorbike, and sometimes he'd come on a 1, 2 o'clock or 12 o'clock during the day, and he'd be like, you want to get out of here? Do you want to go riding? And I'm like, oh, dude, I got to work. Like, I'm working 3 days a week here. I need to make, he goes, nah, it's all right. He goes, I'll pay you. So, he'd pay me, he'd look after me, and we'd just go riding for the day. And then I think within about a month or 2 months, we went to Cambodia together, because he'd teed up with one of the suppliers who had an orphanage. He was funding an orphanage over there. So we went and did some charity work, and my dad had a construction background. So we built a basketball court. We did some really cool stuff at the orphanage. And within, I think, a couple of months, it was maybe a year later, he had the idea to launch this first national commercial IT division. It was all his idea. He was, as I said, he was very forward thinking. So he went to Jerry Harvey and he pitched him this idea. And then he came back to me, told me first before anyone, he goes, Jerry is going to support it. He goes, I'm leaving the store. New franchisees coming. He goes, let me go set up for a couple of weeks or a month, and then I'll send you an offer. And I was all right. So I stayed in the store for a bit. Sure enough, a month later, I got a job offer come through. And it was a full-time gig. It was a business development manager, sort of helping him. It was like the co-founder, basically, of this business, like, that you're going to come and help me build it. He was more managing up, and I would be sort of managing down suppliers, front of house, sales, all that sort of stuff. And, it was a good full-time corporate wage. And having been making 30 grand a year and working part-time pulling beers, I jumped at the opportunity. I was like, this is awesome. But I still wanted to be an actor. So I said to him, I said, oh, look, I don't want to give up acting. I still want to sort of do this. And he goes, look, keep acting, do that. And in my mind, I was like, I'm just going to do it for 12 months. And then within 12 months, the business had done $54 million revenue we'd done in our first 12 months of business, which was incredible. So, Jerry said to us, he goes, oh, what do you guys think you're going to do? And he said to Jerry, I think he'd predicted maybe 15 to 20 million in the first year. And he just goes, oh, okay. And he goes, look, just don't lose any bloody money. That was his direction. He goes, just don't lose any money. We done 54 million in the first year, and it just exploded out of nowhere. So this next thing, I was national sales manager, and it took over marketing, and then we just grew, and then we acquired one of our competitors. It just exploded, and $200 million by the second year of revenue. It was Yeah.
Do you think it was so just circling back to your acting a little bit, do you think it was your time spent in that environment on screen that I guess gave you the ability to, that storytelling capability that enabled you to perform that well in the sales environment? What do you think it was?
100%. Look, I think it's a combination of probably all of those things. I think definitely mindset. My belief was always hard work gets you places, by the sweat of my brow. If I pull my sleeves up and I work hard and I work harder than other people, then I'll be able to get there. So it was that mindset. It was personal branding, which I ended up doing a lot of consulting on for some professional athletes, and I still do a lot of stuff around branding and businesses. I always believed in sort of dressing well, presenting yourself well, making sure your car's always clean, having meals prepared, like just this structure. And then I think, the performing, the storytelling, and the biggest thing I think for me has been relationship building. And I've said this to people a lot of times, there's no skill set, no degree, nothing more important in the world. The best thing that anyone can learn is relationship building. And there's nothing you can tell me that's more important than that. If you look from a Christian point of view, it says in the Bible, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father except through me. The whole thing around eternal salvation is to do with your relationship with Jesus Christ, right? That's the foundation of Christianity. Number one, relationship with God. Then on an earthly sense, the relationship you have with yourself, people self-care, all this, how you have a relationship with yourself, the relationship you have with your spouse, with your parents, with your kids, you've got kids, the relationship you have with your employer. If you're being a dickhead for whatever reason and you're speeding and the cop pulls you over, if you have a good relationship with him and you are nice, you might be able to get out of a ticket, as opposed to, oh, you're bullshit, I wasn't doing anything, you dog, like he's going to throw the book at you, So being able to build authentic relationships with people quickly is literally the foundation of everything. You go to the cafeteria, the cafe down the road, the barista remembers your coffee order, or you do a nice thing for someone. Everything is relationships. And I remember reading books from a young age, like guys like Zig Ziglar and all these really, and I think having Christianity as the foundation too. I was just very cognizant of the fact that relationships will get you places. You could be the most educated person, have the most degrees, and we've all seen this in business. Someone might have a fantastic resume, but they're a fuckwit, or they're just not a team player, or no one likes them. Or you've got a boss who's just a pain in the ass. No one cares. There's that saying, what do they say? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Mm.
And I thought, so for me, that I would always just try and build relationships with people, understand who they are, what they're there for, what they're motivated by. And then I think, acting as well, all that together, I think you put all that together is kind of how I think I've been successful and been able to transcend a lot of different industries. Is just a different wheelhouse or set of skills that not a lot of people have. Like, I'm not saying I'm the hardest dude in the world. There's guys like Ben Roberts-Smith or, SAS guys who are much better than me in, that tactical, that policing weapons thing. At a 10, I might be an 8. There's people in life who are better at sales and marketing than me. I think there's very few people who are consistently across all of them who have all of those skills. Someone might be awesome at one thing or a great salesperson, but, you've seen a lot of these business guys, they can't fight their way out of a wet paper bag. They're an intellectual, so they just don't build rapport with people. So I think for me, it was trying to be a modern day Renaissance man. You look at guys back in the day who were skilled at a lot of areas. I remember studying the Renaissance period around Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, and these guys were so good at so many things. It still blows my mind today. Michelangelo, one of the guys that absolutely blows my mind. If he'd have just painted the Sistine Chapel for his whole career, you'd be like, dude, that's incredible. Have you ever seen it, the Sistine Chapel?
Yeah, been there, yeah.
Yeah, how incredible is that? You think of a modern average guy today, you look at their Wikipedia of what they achieve in a lifetime. Some people do some great things, but most people, I would say, majority of men these days, will never achieve something as monumental as painting the Sistine Chapel that's remembered for generations. Some guys are flat out, paying child support or managing their normal responsibilities, right? But then I was like, not only that, he also then went and did the most famous statue in history in Michelangelo's David. And I'm like, fuck is this guy? Like, yeah, it's a totally different. One's painting a brush and one's a chisel. And it was like, and it was, had biblical and scriptural references. And I'm sure when I looked up, he did many other works as well. And I was like, you compare that to an average guy today of what an average dude does. And people would always say to me too, like, oh, you got to stay in your lane. You're jack of all trades, master of none. I'm like, dude, have you ever read who Leonardo da Vinci is and what he achieved in his lifetime? One of the first dudes to attempt flight. He was performing surgery and operations and, studying the human body and anatomy. He did the Mona Lisa, and you're telling me that you only can be a plumber, or you can only be, a corporate guy, or you can only be a banker, or you can only be come on, man. What I realized very early is that what's changed is the device, distractions, all these different distractions which stop us from achieving our potential. It was ironic. The thing that made me successful, I think, also was the cause of my burnout and my massive crash as well, of going down that line of going, I can do all things. I can do this, I can do that, I can do that. And then, as I said, I realized after a period that you can't run flat out. It was back in that time, I think The Rock and all these people were going, oh, sleep when you're dead, this hustle culture. And I sort of took it literally. And I was like, oh, well, these people are working hard. I'm going to work harder because it worked for me before. But it gets to a point where it stopped working. And I was like, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble here. So I had to relearn a few things.
When did you start to feel like it was all going to come crashing down? Did you ever get a hint that it was coming on, or did it just hit you like a ton of bricks?
No, it hit me like a ton of bricks. It literally happened within a few days, within a week. I remember saying to one of my mates, we would always train together and, compete and compete with one another in gym and try and outlift each other and outbench each other. And we'd done so since we were kids. We were always competitive. We wanted to have a better car or a better bike or lift more or look better or be more shredded, whatever. It was just that healthy competition. And I said to him one day, I said, dude, I couldn't be stuffed. I would go to the gym and I started noticing I'd go to the gym and I was exhausted. I'd do my core stability to start and I would be at the gym for 20 minutes and I'd leave. I was so tired. I couldn't get through a session. I just had no motivation. I started just wanting to eat, just eat bad food and I didn't know what was happening, but I couldn't sustain the level of workouts. And I realized retrospectively what had happened was I had flat to the floor, gas. I was all gas and no break. And when I got into that corporate gig, managing that business, the amount of staff we had, the KPIs, the stress of that role in itself would have been enough for a normal person. But then I was on home and away semi-regularly. I was managing some professional Australian athletes. I was doing consulting to the NRL and all these high-profile athletes, brokering sponsorship deals, consulting 2 nights a week to different sporting codes and players. I was preparing to get married. We were renovating a house. I was still supporting my family back home and helping out with some things there. I'd never drank coffee before. I was never a coffee drinker. And the next thing I'm drinking 3-4 long blacks a day. I'm living at the coffee machine at work, just hitting the long black button 3 or 4 times, in a cup like this big. And I'd had pre-workout in the morning before that as well. And it was just trying to keep up with, and I don't think I'd taken a holiday for nearly 6 or 7 years. I just didn't take holidays. I never had sick days. I just didn't get sick. It just kind of hit me. I started feeling burnt out. And then I was, having a couple of drinks with some friends one night. I remember actually what happened. Was pushing through. I was traveling overseas. I was actually traveling with the Matildas at the time. I was managing one of the top Matildas players, and I was at an event. It was out in the sticks, in a desert area. It was at a training camp, and we were filming a promo video, and she was out there, and I was in my suit in the sun. And I got dehydrated and I felt really, really sick. I just was dehydrated. I'd been to a Bucks party the week before. We partied. We had a big night, lack of sleep. I got there and I pushed through. And I remember not being able to sleep the night before. I was just really restless. And I woke up on no sleep. Adrenaline was through the roof and I was I'm not sleeping. And I had a panic attack. First time I'd never had a panic attack. My nervous system was just shot. And I was like, oh man, like what's happening here? And I, I s- I spoke to a friend of mine who was a doctor, and he just said to me, he goes, mate, take the day off. He goes, don't go to the thing. And I said, no, I'll push through. Dehydrated. I ended up in hospital the next day, dehydrated in the States, massive dehydration. And then I came back from that trip and I was having panic attacks on the flight on the way home. And yeah, I was just in a really, really bad state. And that sort of, it just came on then. And I got back and I worked for a bit. I was still on home and away, but I was just shot and I just didn't know how to, I suppose, self-care or what to do. And then, anxiety and depression and all this stuff started coming, which I'd never had before. And I literally spiraled. It was really ugly. And I didn't know how to sort of navigate out of it.
Mm. So ultimately, you ended up in a position where you'd pretty much lost everything, from what I understand. But there was a person that came into your life that lifted you off the canvas, essentially. Did you want to talk to that about Rob?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that guy was exceptional. I took some time off work because for my mental well-being, as I said, I was in a really, really bad state. I'd been to rehab, for mental health breakdown a couple of times. And I knew that the doctor model wasn't working. The whole, like, you go and see a psych or someone like that. This is just my experience, right? I'm not a doctor. But most of the psychiatrists that I saw, they didn't give a shit about you as a person. They just wanted to give you drugs, and that was it. And I was like, well, I've never needed medication before. I've never had these issues. Like, now people understand things about childhood trauma or reasons you do the things you do. Like, obviously, I felt maybe some need to externally validate or prove to the world or to my family, or that I had to save the world. I always had this nature of needing to protect people or fix problems or do that, which maybe in some ways my career is still around that now a little bit, because obviously your experiences shape your reality and what you've been through. But for me, childhood trauma was like if something really horrific had happened to you, like which you hear about, or, you're living in a war-torn country. And I was like, well, that stuff didn't happen to me. So for me, I didn't think childhood trauma, I didn't think any of that was relevant to me. And I suppose my coping way of doing things, dealing with stuff, was always just achieve high, keep going, keep moving. So the things that helped me in some ways also then ended up not working anymore. Does that make sense? It got me to a certain point, and then those tools that I'd had just stopped working. And I was like, oh man, like, what do I do here? So my marriage started falling apart. I think people tried to help and they're like, maybe didn't know how to. And I had family members, even some were supportive, some were not, some were really horrible. I had one family member, I won't mention who, but they just said, mate, do everyone a favor and go kill yourself. And I was just like, I was rock bottom. I didn't know what to do. Like I said, I was in a really, really bad place. Yeah, and I just took a job of that period for what I could do. And I ended up as a postie at Australia Post, believe it or not, when they had those electric scooters came out, and it was close to my house. And I was actually grateful, because I was like, well, I want to do something, but I was not capable then of doing anything else. I was in such a bad place. I couldn't function anymore. It was just, and I knew I had to keep going. So I was like, I've got to do something. I was at Australia Post, and I met some of the best people in my life there. Some of the Australia Post community and the workers, and they're just hardworking, good people, and it's funny, the people that sometimes don't have the most are willing to help the most, or what they want to give the most, because I had a lot of people in the corporate world, and look,
Absolutely.
I had some great friends reach out. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like a victim here in any sense of the word. But the people you thought would help you in the scenarios maybe weren't there. And then the people that, you didn't think would be there. And then also there are some people who you thought would be there, and then they were as well. But it was just amazing, because I ended up working in a housing commission area of Macquarie Fields, the most random place. It was kind of not far from my house, but it was it's a pretty rough neighborhood. And the people there, the Islander people, there were so many good people who just knew that I was in a bad way. They could just tell by my body language how I would present. They're like, he's in some trouble. They'd invite me into their home, if I needed to use the bathroom on my beat, I could go in there. If it was raining, I could sit and have lunch with them on the deck. And I was so humbled. Like, you know, I'd done all these great things and I felt that I always needed to achieve and do the best and whatever. And then, you know, when things are falling apart around you, to have people like that, you know, in Macquarie Fields and the Salvation Army there were great. I'm still in touch with the chaplain and the guys there who run that. I'd go in there for lunch and I've actually started attending their men's group. Like, and he's like, wow, like I only saw him recently. He's like, wow, like the change, like he hadn't met the real me. He only knew the version of me that was like my world is ending. And, yeah, that was really
Right.
humbling. So that's where I met Rob. I'd known him for about a month or two and he knew that I was struggling on my beat. He could see that I wasn't getting through the parcels and what I had to do. And this was kind of his retirement job. Like him and his wife, Petra, just the most lovely, down to earth, the best people that you could want to meet. And he would come and meet me around lunch and he'd be like, oh, how many parcels have you got? He'd just go, oh, just give me some of those parcels. So literally he would help at first. And then it was nearly every day because it was during the bushfire period and COVID as well, lockdown. So you can imagine everyone was just ordering online. Like Australia Post, just like the parcels were through the roof. That's all people were doing was just online shopping. And, you know, the CEO at the time, I don't think this is really, you know, anything that is not public knowledge. Christine Holgate, she was just the most out of touch person. She was buying people Cartier watches, the management team. She was spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on, you know, luxury travel and like, carolers, like 70 grand to have Christmas carolers in, you know, in the thing. She had this like RS something Audi and her number plate was one postie, like the number one postie. And it's like, you've never even fucking delivered a parcel in your life. You just had no idea. Like the people in the coalface were getting absolutely smashed. You know, like people were having horrific circumstances. You know, people lost family members, you know, during that COVID period. And he was this CEO, like talk about the epitome of the worst leadership you could imagine. He's just, you know, so bad that the Prime Minister at the time actually called her out and asked her to step down, you know, and made a
Yeah, I
public thing
remember
of
it
it.
was all over the news.
You know, they're some of the hardest working people and some of the, you know, some of them don't make great money. And I was there and the people who had nothing were like willing to help. And it was so, I don't know how to describe it. It was humbling. It was, I don't know. I felt like maybe in a way God was taking me on a journey, like to showing me, you know, for the rebuild when I came back that I needed to have a more of a purpose and things like that because I was just stuck. I didn't know what to do, but it was just that experience really shaped who I was. But yeah, going back to Rob, that difficult period, he was, it was pretty much over with my marriage at the time. And he just said, look, why don't you come stay at our place? So I sort of moved out of my home and, yeah, I stayed with him and his wife. They cooked food, helped me get back on my feet when I was not functioning, drove me to rehab for the last time, like the last one that I went to. I went to, a place where Thorpe and a lot of the high-end athletes and executives go where they're like burnout and stuff. Literally drove me to rehab. It was like a few days before Christmas that year. Yeah, and then picked me up. I was there for, I think, 6 weeks, and that was kind of a turning point. And yeah, he was just really helpful, really supportive. Man, they're just special people, man. They're just you know, to not know someone from a bar of soap and to take someone into your house like that. Never asked me for anything, never charged me anything, and just one of my best mates to this day. It was just, yeah, you can't make this stuff up, you know, like the journey that I'd been on. And it was just like, yeah, really humbling to be able to rebuild now with a different perspective and having had those experiences. Because before that, you know, you hear people talk about mental health, and I had no understanding. You've been through your own challenges as well from what I've read and what we spoke about. And I think you'd probably attest to this without going through stuff like that yourself. Yeah, it just gives you a different outlook. What do you think?
It's just what you were saying before as well, in terms of, you know, it seems to always be the people that have come from nothing and have nothing that offer the most support.
Yeah.
Yeah, it always surprises me who comes out of the woodwork to offer assistance in those circumstances. Before we come on to the home stretch, I do want to touch on something there. You said it felt like God was taking on a journey, and when you were talking about being out in those housing commission areas, when you were at Ozpost and going through the Salvation Army there, that almost felt like a bit of a full circle moment to me, because you mentioned in your childhood as well that you'd grown up in housing
Yeah.
commission. it felt like that moment was really important to you as well as your faith. Do you mind talking to that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, as I said, I worked so hard. I wanted to get out of Housing Commission and I wanted to get away from that. And for me, it was like spiritually and everything, like working so hard to get away from it. And we live in a world where people are chasing material things, or oh, you're a brokey, you're this, you got to do that, you got to all that. And it's all about this sort of thing. Not that I was really materialistic, but I was really driving hard to achieve, to overachieve, to prove myself, maybe um, to feel that I needed to have these things or these titles or these things to be good enough, or to be accepted, or to be loved, or to be accepted by. I think maybe a lot of it was I didn't have that close relationship with my dad, which I really wanted to have, and it's ridiculous now when I think about it. It's like the belief in some ways was, well, like, I'll get rich and famous and I'll get successful and then I'll be accepted. You know, it was almost like that in a way, and burnt myself out trying to get something that I suppose I'd already had. So maybe in some ways it was a reminder where I came from, and a reminder that, I was also a minister in my church. So I was preaching before the breakdown as well. And I think I spoke to a guy called John Novak. He was another guy, a mindset coach, works a lot with sporting organizations. He was really, really kind, really helpful at the time. Dr. Craig Duncan was another one, working in the professional sports space. The guy's a legend. Now, John said to me, he goes, "You've been teaching the way," he goes, "but you probably haven't been living the way." And that sort of stuck out to me. You can understand things intellectually and theoretically without applying them in your life as well. And I think it even says scripturally in the Bible that those people who know and teach, and that, you'll be judged more harsh. Like, you should have known better, right? So if I'm there preaching in church and I'm doing this, but there's gaps or there's holes or there's areas where I haven't repented, or I haven't forgiven someone, or I haven't, had Christ at the center of my life, I feel like that was God allowed that, and the circumstances, the trauma and unresolved things allow for those circumstances for me to have that breakdown, right? There was things I still obviously needed to learn. And I remember something Jordan Peterson said to me, not to me. So he said it in his podcast, and I felt like he was talking to me. He goes, when you're at rock bottom, you've got two choices. You can either blame God. He goes, you're pretty bold if you're going to do that. Or you can sit back and go, maybe there's something I'm doing in myself that has created this thing. And it's the story of Job. He never blamed God. He sort of accepted it. And he goes, "You're my God in the good times and the bad times." And for me, it was like that. It was that moment. I just knew that it was like, he's doing a work in me, or there's something here that I need to learn, and to have, not again, humility, because I don't think I wasn't like one of these guys that was flexing on people or anything like that. But I needed to get through that period and pick up some more skills and resilience to become the person that I am now. And when you look at Jesus too, who he hung out with, he hung around with the tax collectors and the sinners and the marginalized and the people on the fringes of society. He wasn't sitting with kings and doing all that. Like, they were his people. And I think as a minister preaching, when I was around the corporate world and around celebrities and, having nice cars and all this stuff, I think maybe it was a reminder to go, hey, like, they're not your people. Like, it would just really brought it back to, it put things into perspective for me, I think. And it just reminded me how Jesus lived, as I said, the people that he associated with. And yeah, I'm definitely a different person now than before,
Yeah, that accountability piece, I think, is something that I have learned a lot about and a lot from over the past couple of years with my own journey. Some names you've already outlined there. Another one, a book I read over summer, a New Zealand mental performance coach, David Neither, his book taught me a lot about that side of things as well, and just where I can take more ownership of my own life and the people that I have around me as well, and creating those visions for myself for the future. Super important things. What do you think most people are missing in today's day and age? Why do you think men in particular are struggling so much?
I think it's very obvious. It's especially what's happened in the last week, is lack of truth. People not putting God and Christ in the center of their life. I genuinely believe that. the analogy I give people sometimes, because a lot of people have asked me this question, you know, when they saw me at my rock bottom, like when I was in my bad place, I was struggling. I didn't think I would come out of it. For me, I thought at any stage, this could be all over. That was where I was at. And a lot of people have asked when they saw me after, and, as I said to you, over the last few years, I've been able to rebuild and, bought some nice cars again and rebuild my life and my business and things like that. And I would regularly, and I still do it. I go weekly meetings in Macquarie Fields. I would drive through sometimes 1, 2 in the morning, the nice car that I had, just to remind myself to go, don't get too ahead of yourself. Don't think that you're better, or don't get caught in that material thing again. So literally quiet times when no one was around. I had an Aston Martin at the time that I sold recently. I would drive my Aston Martin through there and I'd stop. I'd catch up with some of the people that I used to know. I'd have a meal and I'd just be really, I was grateful. Grateful for the lessons. But yeah, going back to what you said, a lot of people ask me this question, and the analogy that I give, it's like if you think of a car, when you buy a new car, right? You have the factory, let's just say Mercedes-Benz head factory in Germany or wherever it is. They make the car. Every car, there's a manual in the glove box, Then you pick up the car, and most people skip the manual. Most people never read the manual when you buy a new car, correct? They get the car, the salesman shows them how to turn it off, shows them where the fuel cap is, where the main things are, how to pair your Bluetooth, and then you're off, and then you just drive, and that's it. And the analogy I give is like God is like the head office factory who's made the car, who's made us, our souls, our beings. And the Bible is effectively the manual on how that car operates, what fuel goes in there, what tire pressure, service intervals. If you ignore all that shit in the physical sense, right? If you just go, I'm just going to drive the car, I'm going to put in diesel, I'm not going to service it, I'm going to service it every 20,000 Ks, every 30,000 Ks. How well does that car run? But if you're more sort of understanding the car, you understand when it needs to be serviced, what kind of fuel, what kind of tire pressure, which profile of tires make the car run better. If you do all these things and you look after the car, you do the paint protection, you can see after 100,000 Ks or 300,000 Ks, a car that's been maintained and serviced and looked after versus a car that someone's just driven it, and it's like, it's evident in the vehicle. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
It's like that. I feel that's what's missing is people are coming out of the factory. People are born and people just go, yeah, I've got it from here. I'm not going to read the manual. I'm not going to read the Bible, which is the universal laws of everything of creation. I'm going to ignore all that. Oh, it's my truth. This is a thing that's famous now. Oh, my truth. It's like, dude, you don't have a truth. You didn't invent air. You didn't invent gravity. You didn't invent anything. If your heart stops beating, you can't just make it. Like, you have no control over everything. And I think the biggest thing is this self-will is things like Instagram is I'm an alpha, I'm this, I've got it covered, I'm a boss babe. People want to be self-sufficient and they don't think they need God. They don't think they need to worship a higher power. And Russell Brand said this very well. He goes, if you don't worship the divine, you end up worshiping the profane. Like, we all have a God. You either have that God or you have another God, whether it's gambling, whether it's your identity, yourself, your ego, the God of self, or it can be your job or your identity. These are the things that people, I think people suffer because whether or not gravity is a good example. Whether or not you believe in gravity, it doesn't matter. You jump off a building, gravity is going to take effect and you're going to hit the ground, you're going to die. So there are all these other universal spiritual laws. And we even heard recently with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, a lot of people have said, this is a spiritual battle. It's, people think it's left and right and it's this, we're amongst ourselves, but we're in a spiritual war every day. And if you don't acknowledge that there is an evil force out there, whether you call it Satan, whether you call it something else that is vying for your soul, is trying to basically, that's his job is to steal, kill and destroy. And I think that's the big thing is people literally, they're driving their car out of the showroom. They're never reading the manual. They're having a crash or they're having a breakdown and they're like, oh my gosh, what the fuck happened? How did I get here? It's like, well, if you read the manual, you'd probably run 30,000 Ks over service. You've got no oil left in the engine. There's been an engine light on. There's all these warning lights on the dash that have popped up for me, which anxiety, depression, all these other symptoms that you're spiritually out of alignment. And people are just so spiritually disconnected. I was too. And I should have known better. I was a minister in my church. But I was like, yeah, it's the theory, it's that, but not actually putting it into practice. And God's like, okay, you know everything, do you? You're going to teach and preach to my sheep and to my people? Well, we'll see. And like the story of Job, Satan went to God and he said, look, I want to test him. And he's like, cool, you can test him. He goes, but don't harm a hair on his head. You can't kill him. Do whatever you want to him, but you can't take his life. And if you're not prepared for that spiritual battle, literally how it works. Like if you have an enemy, and another example is if you've got an enemy outside your house and he's out there every day trying to kill you and trying to ruin your life. If you walk out and you have no understanding of who he is, what objectives he has, or you don't even acknowledge he's there, like how dangerous is that situation, And that's why in the Bible, it talks to us, it says we're like sheep. We're like literally defenseless sheep against a roaring lion. And most people every day walk out spiritually, I'm sweet, and there's literally a lion, there's an enemy trying to seek, kill, and destroy them, and they're just not even acknowledging his existence, and then they're wondering why their lives, are in such a disaster. And you've only got to look at the world the way it is now, like, how some of these people have reacted to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the celebrating, the evil, the demonic, the laughs, their behavior. Like there's just, it's real. So I think to answer your question, that's where so many people get it wrong, is they don't have a belief in anything other than themselves and this temporary state of existence and world we believe in. And it's very evident because when those hard times come, it's kind of like being in a firefight. For example, we're talking about the federal police, tactical operations, training with weapons. If I'm going to be dumped in a war zone, hypothetically, and you have no training and you've got to pick up a weapon and you don't know anything about how long are you going to last? Like you get picked off very quickly. Yeah, and that's why, the guys like the SAF, there's such high levels of training to go and deal with a physical battle. But if you're in a spiritual battle and you're not equipped spiritually with the word of God, it says to put on the armor of God. That's why it's spiritual warfare. It's a war in the mind, right? And if you don't have these defenses and you don't have the armor of God, mate, you may as well be dropping yourself in the middle of a war zone as an unarmed civilian. You got no hope. And that's what, I experienced the hard way. And it was only when I went back to the scripture and the teaching, I was able to come back, by the grace of God, I was able to come back and be stronger than I was before. But yeah, that's 100% the reason. And, the response to Charlie Kirk and his teachings and what he said, I think you see the outpouring of the following that guy's gathered. That's not a fluke. That's not for no reason, because when people speak truth, and I'm not talking about everything, all his political views, nobody except Christ is perfect. And I think that's where we go wrong as humans. Someone can be 95% good or 90% good, and then there's 10% bad. Oh, you want to throw him out. Like we hold people to this expectation of perfection. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. No business is perfect. And to have that expectation of ourselves or other people is where you go wrong. Unless it's Jesus Christ, he ain't going to be perfect. People pick on whether it's world leaders. Oh, he did this 20 years ago. Mate, who hasn't got a past? That's the idea of repentance. You do the wrong thing, you turn away and you change. When people want to pin you, for things you did 20 years ago or 2 years ago. I mean, when I came out of rehab or I went through my breakdown, I wasn't the best. People come out of the woodworks and say, oh, I did this. I was not good. I was not in a good place. But that's the idea of repentance and learning and turning away and trying to be better. And God said, and Jesus says, if I don't accuse you, then no one else is going to accuse you. That's the idea. But I think we apply our own human intellect to situations. And yeah, I think it's really interesting to see and good to see not the uprising, I don't think that's the right word, but a lot of people going back to their faith in the last week alone, like you've seen it on the news, and people, embracing these traditional values, because we've seen, dare I say it, I don't want to say the left, but we've seen cultures and societies when they're devoid of values, how that's worked out for us. People think they know everything. It's like, well, we've got more suicide than ever before. We've got higher divorce rates, unemployment, economies. Like, how well have we been doing, with these, at my truth and everyone has a say and all this? We've moved further away from God and Christianity than ever before. I think we'd agree right now at this point, we're further away from God as a nation and as societies than ever before. And I think most people would agree we're also worse off in most ways than ever before. So you don't have to be that intelligent to put two and two together and work out, what we need to do or where we need to. And that's the whole idea of repentance. It literally means to make a U-turn. It means to turn around and go back. And that's until we do that, and then until people embrace that, I think we're going to see a lot more of what we've been seeing. You know?
Well, you've been very generous with your time, mate. I really appreciate it. Maybe to bring us home, you've got a new podcast now. You're founder of the Hills Ledger. Tell us where people can find you and what it's all about.
Yeah, so the Hills Ledger is just like yourself, you know, wanted to be creative and connect with people and share. Well, it's the Hills Ledger because I'm based in the hills, and it's all stuff that I like. These old school like Chesterfield couches and the gentleman and the old school values and traditions. Initially, I wanted to do it to share my journey and things that I'd been on, but really to use the skill set that I've built in such a variety of different careers, branding, marketing, growing businesses, going through these difficult periods, scaling, building, go-to-market strategies, and just getting involved in the local community. So it's, you know, things that I love, like cars, lifestyle, property, mental well-being, and things like that. So it's talking about all these people, connecting with people that I've worked with along my journey, and, you know, sharing these stories, you know, as you said, being an actor and being a storyteller. That's what I wanted to do. So that's really what the podcast is about. There is, you know, and the first, I was really lucky to have Lynn McGranger, played Irene on Home and Away as my first guest, and I got some other really cool guests lined up. So yeah, that's kind of more that. But where people can find me is LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active, and a lot of the stuff I just try and get to the truth of everything. Of, you know, I try and look at things with a perspective of just being authentic and sharing that wisdom, I suppose, of my experiences of what I've learned. And yeah, it's funny. Like I've only probably been active on LinkedIn for 6 months, but you know, as you said, I've sort of built a bit of a following, and some of my stuff's, you know, trended and gone viral. And it just really made me realize too, especially even in the last week, people like Charlie Kirk and people who are speaking the truth, people are desperate for it because we've gone so far away as a society from truth. So that's kind of, yeah, the perspective that I share things on. But yeah, that's it. So LinkedIn is probably the best, and my new platform on social media is Black Suit Desk. It's pretty much, I would always wear black suits or black clothes, and I'm at the desk, you know, usually talking or sharing some insights. So yeah, they're the main ones.
Love it, mate. Really cool. I'll put all the links in the show notes for people so they can find you easy. But again, thank you so much for today. I think people will get really good value out of this episode. And yeah, the journey you've been on has been spectacular. And yeah, wishing you all the best with the Hills Ledger and whatever comes next.
Mate, I appreciate it. And can I just say as well, congratulations to you as well. You know, I've been on a few podcasts recently, and I think everyone these days has a podcast and a mic of what I've said. And, you know, the professionalism, and maybe because of it's what you do in your career, in your job, I was blown away. You know, you sent me the PDF and, you know, your story, your background of who you are, and, you know, the objective of the show and all this stuff. I was like, wow, this is so professional and well put together. I feel like these days, you know, people have a podcast, they just hit record, throw a few mics on, and they just talk about whatever. You know, it just seems to be like for views and likes and clicks. And I really like the thought and the depth that you, and the meaning you have behind what you're doing, you know, drop balls and big calls. And we've all had those moments. So I think what you're doing is awesome, man. And I really appreciate you having me on the show, and it means a lot. So thanks for your time, man.
Likewise. Again, thank you so much. Thanks for listening to this episode of Drop Balls and Big Calls. If you've got any feedback, guest suggestions, or even sponsorship inquiries, please email jason@bigcallspod.com.au. But again, above all else, just appreciate you being here. Thanks for listening.